So I'm hopping onto the Cartier bandwagon late, and it's been a very long time since I've dedicated a video to this brand. I did one on the Santos. It's one of my best videos I've done on this brand, and that was 6 years ago already. 6 years ago. Unbelievable. But the reputation of just that watch alone, the Santos, continues to climb as the years have gone by, and it doesn't seem like it's stopping anytime soon. And the interest in the Cartier name as a watchmaker, even more so. And it says a lot about the current climate we're in, the future of watch collecting, the future of brand appeal. But I think what fascinated me and what has perpetuated the making of this video now is that millennials and Gen Zs, the interest in Cartier has skyrocketed massively. And I think this says a lot about the time we're in and watch collecting in general and where the enthusiasm is going. How these designs are so timeless that they are traveling generations ahead. And I just thought it would be a refreshing time to unpack something different. This is a different genre to what I usually talk about. I am by no means experienced in this space, but there is a big commentary to be made. Cartier's rise to prominence is one of the most interesting watch stories out there. A brand known by most as a jewelry maker, now risen to the heights of watchmaking elitism. But we also forget that minuscule detail that in 1904, Louis Cartier was one of the first makers to actively produce a watch that would be worn on a wrist. This, of course, being for Alberto Santos Dumont. We've got to try and imagine a time where even at this stage, pocket watches were the only choice. Wristwatches were not a thing. Timekeepers were kept in pockets on chains. And even after all of that, wristwatches were a popular choice for ladies in the 1910s because, well, they just weren't seen as masculine enough. It took a few wars overseas through the late 1800s and a big one in Europe to sort of cement the significance of the wristwatch. This turn of the century, First World War, was the real start of it. The idea of taking pocket watches and welding them to straps to fit around the wrist. And it's just such a typical male thing that this was born out of practicality. It had nothing to do with fashion or style. It was the simple fact that being hands-free in a conflict zone is a luxury. So having a watch on the wrist, far more practical and useful option. A couple years down the line, we started seeing these designs becoming more regimented, smaller, easier to fit on the wrist, straps and everything integrated, and so the wristwatch became a part of military dress. But prior to all of this, prior to watches becoming fashionable for ladies and becoming a tool for men, we're talking 10, 20 years beforehand. A Brazilian aviator had the foresight of wanting a watch to be worn on his wrist while he flew. And for a similar reason, because he never had his hands free while operating aircraft. So where Cartier as this brand has a fashion watch affiliation, more style over substance, they do in fact hold some of the earliest indelible world records. In the Santos alone, it's one of the first recorded wristwatches, it's one of the first sports watches, the first pilot watch, and a very stylish one to boot. Now, of course, they hold the accolades as jewelers, but they've also had a large part to play in the watch world for well over 100 years. And at a time where wristwatches were becoming the fashionable choice among men and women, Cartier then took this opportunity and launched so many of these incredible designs in Paris, which was fashion epicenter of the world. Now, yes, they made beautiful cases, but they did rely on certain manufacturers, you guessed it, Jaeger or Jaeger-LeCoultre, to install the mechanical hearts in these things. Now, since Cartier watches and their designs were such novelties, and Jaeger was a watchmaking magician, also just as unique, it allowed for Cartier to experiment with beautiful styles, flowing lines, and organic shapes. And that is how models like the Tortue, one of my favorites, the Tourneau, took shape in the early 1920s. A few years later, the Tank, the Cintré, the American, all through the 20s and the 30s. Let's just say that Cartier's portfolio is vast, and we'll leave it there. We'll probably spend a bit more time looking at certain designs later on. It's just amazing to think that 100 years on, this name is stronger than ever. Genuinely, it's one of the most recognizable brand names on the planet, and in the watch world, the name has become so popular. And we have to ask that question, what has been responsible for what seems to be the meteoric rise in Cartier's popularity in the watchmaking space over the last 10 to 15 years? I guess now is as good a time as any to admit that, as a lover of design and history, Cartier watches have never really appealed to me, personally. And it feels odd to say it because I know about the significance of this brand, how influential, how important it has been for the development of the wristwatch. And it feels like a cardinal sin to admit it that as a designer, I should just naturally be someone drawn to the brand. But maybe it's because they venture further over into the aesthetic-driven area of watchmaking. Dressier by design, where I am more of a fan of pieces that meet in the middle. But we live in a confusing time today, where the mechanical wristwatch is obsolete, at least to most. We have tools to tell us the time. We have digital devices. The time is everywhere. So much about our hobby is nostalgia-driven. We love mechanical things because it's hands-on, it's physical. Something that we can see, it's tangible, it's tactile. Unlike the digital world that we live in, where if it breaks, we don't understand it, we throw it away, we get a new one without a thought. And younger generations, the ones that have come after mine, the millennials, they've grown up in a time without this mechanical tactility, which I think is a crying shame that they've never known a world without a digital display. So my belief why my generation and many others have embraced Cartier, including the older generations, of course, it's very simple. Very much how Cartier began. Their watches were seen as fashion accessories first. They weren't seen for the watchmaking, they were seen as objects of style. But then 100 years on, they're iconic. They're at the highest peak when it comes to design and presentation. And let's not forget also that the Cartier brand, it's a highly recognizable name. So you take all of these contributing factors and you throw them into the melting pot. How could Cartier lose? Their status and reputation has been solid throughout history. And they're making a comeback in a great way because of current trends and current appeal. Now what impresses me about Cartier is that you can spot these watches from across the room. But not because they are loud and pretentious, but quite the opposite, because they're so well composed and put together. And with such an impressive design portfolio, the brand has just moved from strength to strength, sizing up their pieces to fit modern wearers' wrists, making pieces like the Santos more technical, skeletonized, with gorgeous new interchangeable bracelet systems, most recently in full titanium. It is a brand, unlike so many others, that has never lost sight on what made their pieces so very collectible and sought after in the first place. And as we have seen over the last 5 years, the watch collecting space has been all over the place. Luckily now we've reached some kind of status. But in the early 2020s, and it's funny to say we're now moving over to the late 2020s, everybody wanted to hop on to the next brand. Hype brands like Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, Rolex, Cartier was still a slow burn. And what's great to see now in hindsight is that they have, in fact, won the day. This is something to point out, that I think so many brands have a very clear direction with where their watches go. Rolex, oyster cases, sports watches built for a niche. Patek Philippe, dress watches, very classical, high complication. Audemars Piguet seems entirely defined by the integrated bracelet sports watch. You can put these watches under very specific banners and categories, where Cartier doesn't seem to be defined by any of them, but is instead more like a chameleon, blending into the environment it's placed in. Whether it's on Thomas Crown's wrist in a suit, whether it's been worn with shorts and a t-shirt, or on the sports field. And whether we like it or not, these significant Cartier designs, they have found themselves on the wrists of celebrities, rappers, actors, influencers, where a few years back, the same people were sporting Patek Philippe's and Audemars Piguet's. Now, instead of seeing the typical integrated bracelet with screws on the bezel, we are seeing piece-unique Santoses and crashes. And I guess another strong detail about Cartier is that so many of their pieces are unisex. So naturally, seeing these designs circulating social media, it's driven guys and girls, younger audiences, to pursue these further. And most importantly now, I think we're recognizing just how timeless they are as designs, where the more squarish rectangular case shape has become a fairly modern trope in our tech-driven landscape. It's not difficult to see Cartier's appeal. And for someone out there who is not into watches, a recognizable case shape is a very easy way to transition across. But while all of this is going on, however, while Cartier's sales are great for the younger generation, for all of us as enthusiasts, the brand has constantly been busy creating and recreating all manners of unique and interesting designs. Every year, they push out unique pieces at places like Watches and Wonders, other watch fairs, and they always sell them out faster as the years go by. Limited to 100 pieces, 50 pieces, 25 pieces. And it seems at the moment, over the last few years, they've been on quite a roll. Recreating these past icons with a few modern appointments like unique materials, custom dials. So you look at all of these different avenues. The experienced collector goes after the vintage pieces because they're historically significant. The nouveau riche hype buyer who was once going after the Patek Nautilus, Royal Oak, the next best thing, are going after these because they're fashionable for the moment. The younger generations see the appeal of these watches because their designs are quite aligned with how we are seeing modern smartwatches and tech today, talking about rectangular case shapes, but also the simple fact that they are unisex in design and they appeal across the board. And if that was not enough, even for those who have no experience in the watch space, the brand of Cartier is so recognizable that it's hard to avoid. So why is it then that Cartier Watches has risen to such prominence? And I think particularly in a time where the mechanical watch is no longer seen as a necessity. Cartier being this, I put in quotes, glorified fashion watch, it meets the criteria far better than most. If I was speaking from a place with no watch knowledge, looking at the fashion and styles of the time today, and interestingly that in the 2020s, I think some of our styles are reverting back 100 years. Seeing a 1920s design on a wrist doesn't seem out of place. And because we're living in a time now where masculinity and femininity, those lines seem to be blurred more and more, that androgyny is the way to go. These watches fit that so well too. While making this video, I think I've found the best word to sum up the Cartier watch. It's a socialite. It rubs shoulders with people and places from all sorts of disciplines and avenues. Casual, sports, dress, it fits into these environments on its own accord. And it's that simplicity, the versatility, coupled with new age design cues that I think partly the reason why it's done so well and continues to do well. Where brands, styles, their influence come and go, Cartier has always been sitting comfortably, which is why I think as far as icons go, these are very hard to beat. I want to hear your thoughts on Cartier. Do you see them more as fashion watches? Do you see the substance behind the design? And if you were to choose one of the many that they offer, which would you go for? I think for me personally, going all in, a platinum cintre, because why not? Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. See you in the next one.